Welcome to Season 7 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those who pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice and determination. Let's get on with the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations is proudly brought to you by Loudon Private Wealth, the team trusted by professionals, veterans and families across Australia to build real long-term financial security. If you want to take control of your finances, protect your future and build real generational wealth, Loudon Private Wealth are the people you want in your corner. They don't do gimmicks, they don't do hype, just smart strategy and honest advice coupled with real-world experience. Check out the links in the description to contact Warren and the team via loudonpw.com.au or 02 8313 0418. Now let's get back to the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations was brought to you by Dead Reckoning Rum, creating individual rum releases commemorating the diggers lost in Afghanistan, proudly supporting veterans, donating 50% of all their profits to veterans organisations around Australia. Look up Dead Reckoning Rum, buy some bottles, connect via Instagram and Facebook and give them your support. Now, let's get back to the show.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue. Today, I'm coming to you live from Newcastle and I've got a good mate of mine on and we've been setting this podcast up for a long time now and it's good to have him on. He had a very distinguished career in both the New South Wales Police and also in the Special Forces as serving in one commando and deployed overseas and on multiple operations. So Afghanistan a couple of times and another operation as well. And it's just great to finally catch up with him and have him on. And welcome to the podcast, Arron Ferguson.
Yeah, g'day Adam. Thanks mate. Thanks for having me on.
Mate, it's an absolute privilege, mate, to sit across from me and record your story, mate. So, mate, before we get into your career in the police and in the commandos, let's go back to a young Arron. Talk me through life growing up as a young fella.
Yeah, mate. So, I suppose born in Melbourne, Victoria, many moons ago now, but and then moving to the Newcastle Hunter region. I was the youngest of my two older brothers, and the older brother to my younger sister, Leander. So, yeah, Shane and Steve are my older brothers. Yeah, mum and dad sort of worked hard and, yeah, mate, it was a good upbringing in the Hunter Valley, down near a place called Cooranbong, just outside of Newcastle for those who aren't local. But, yeah, big country town, so it was pretty good back in the day, mate.
And what were you like at school, mate? Were you pretty good or...?
Yeah, well, probably like a lot of you. It's one of those things, if there was something that I was interested in, you know, you kind of went okay because you put a bit of effort in, but yeah, schooling and, you know, I suppose having older brothers who were doing more mature things above me, I just wanted to do those sort of things and not schoolwork, so not overly good at school, no.
And looking back now, mate, compared to where we are in 2025, I'm guessing you would have grown up like I did where you're out, you're in the bush, building cubby houses, building dirt trucks,
absolutely,
doing all, and you had to be home when the street lights came on.
Yeah.
Different time.
Yeah.
You know, compared to what, you know, technology didn't exist.
That's right, yeah. No, it was, you know, and I do see the issues with, I suppose, the jobs that I've done later on in life that, you know, the risks of being out and about, you know, after dark and those sort of things, that it's just a different world we live in now than when we were growing up as kids, that's for sure.
And, like, looking back now, mate, especially with, you know, when you got into the police, do you look back now as, because I know I do, and I'm like, how didn't I die, like running up stormwater trains or doing all the things that we used to do, and there was no fear, like swinging off rope swings, off cliffs and all this.
Yeah.
Like, you just did it.
That's right.
You didn't think of the consequences.
Yeah, mate, yeah, we grew up with motorbikes and paddock basher cars and, you know, going to my uncle's farm shooting guns and stuff, you know, so like, although that was safe, but, you know, this motorbike and you know, racing cars around the back paddock like it was. I still remember one time I was with my brother Shane, and he was. We used to do this figure of 8 sort of track in the mud sort of thing, just drifting, full on drifting, and like the passenger door popped open, and I literally was going to fall out if I hadn't have grabbed the seatbelt. So it's just, and the stories are just non-stop of near misses, near deaths, but I suppose that's what makes us who we are today.
It is. You sort of, like I sit there, mate, you were following in my childhood of just being out with mates, being in the dirt, doing all the fun things that I think kids today, like they go, I'm catching up with mates, and they're on a computer.
Exactly, mate.
Yeah. Like, what the? That's not hanging out with your mates.
Yeah.
So,
and it's funny you say that, because so often, there's a couple of things I think about when you say that, and that is, what we were doing to our cars when it comes to, working on them, or even doing things around the yard. That a thing with my kids that, you've got to learn how to check your tyre pressures, change your oil, service your cars, be aware, have that situation awareness of a tyre wearing out or going flat or whatever else. So, I've tried my best as far as, their interest goes to, instill those fundamental things that we just grew up with that they think's just, a punish or a job to do. But we see that in society, as the older I get, and new people that would come into the police or the Defence Force, they just didn't have skill sets, things that you just take for granted that you think they should know, but they've just never been exposed to it. And it's a generational move, I definitely know that, but it's just sad to think that, organisations like the Army are getting veterans back in to teach them how to, kill and capture an animal to survive, it's crazy to think that...
Mate, you talk about that where kids don't even know how to iron a shirt.
Exactly.
Like you're teaching sergeants there, teaching kids how to put the washing powder in the washing machine and how to iron shirts. And these are all perishable skills if you don't learn them. If you don't maintain them. They're gone.
Yeah, or you got to learn them to start with. That's the problem.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Kids these. I can do that.
Yeah, that's right.
Get off your ass and do it yourself.
Yeah. I still maintain that if you don't have a job by, 1920, you need to be joining the Defence Force in some way. It doesn't need to be a war-fighting role. We know the numbers are struggling in our services, forces, that if you don't know what you want to be, or maybe, there's some skills to be learnt there. And I think it's, it's really good for young people to learn those fundamental skills.
Well, I think what I've always thought, mate, is that they should bring back national service. Like, I really think they should.
Yeah, it is one of those things. I think you've got to be, I know what I've just said about going in, but, you don't want the wrong people in there, lazy people just avoiding the work. You've got to have some type of, interest, motivation, but, and there's a job for everyone in there. That's what I sort of tell young people when I talk to them, whether it is the police or the Defence Force, that there is a job for everyone. It's like its own community. We need cooks, nurses, frontline troops, all the support staff, pilots, the whole kit and caboodle. So there is a job for everyone, and I'm sure if you've got half a brain and a heartbeat, they'll probably take you,
Well, I think, mate, if we look at both the military and the police worldwide now, there's a worldwide shortage. Like people just don't seem to be joining either the military or
that's right. That's right, and it's sad because, we all sort of know how important they are, and most people don't need them until there is a major conflict or a major incident that happened in your life. And then when that does happen, to call on those services is, it's a time in your life where you really need them. And it's just a result of young people not wanting to, and I don't mean it's not everyone, it just seems to be a little bit of a trend coming through that, they don't want to sweat, bleed or hurt or be cold or be hot or whatever to join these jobs that are challenging at times, even the training and selection for them.
Even so, mate, I think too, honourable jobs, like join the military or the police.
Absolutely.
Honourable jobs. being of service
Yep.
is honourable.
Yeah, it's rewarding. It's you're dealing with a vast range of the community in the police. Again, it's one of those things you deal with. 1% of the population most of the time, but different sections deal with other pieces of the community. But it's just I just don't think the interest is there. It's it is a tough job. It's a challenging job. It takes probably good marks at school to get in.
Which I think I spoke to Panda, and when I had so go back and Panda McFarlane.
Yeah.
Panda McFarlane. He said it in his podcast, and he summed it up really well. Was police have gone away from trade backgrounds.
Well, that's what I was. I was a fitter by trade.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. And he said it. Your brickies, your builders, your plumbers, your electricians made some of the best cops.
Yep, they're no academics, but they're no dills either. They know life skills. They got the potentially the empathy and also the brain and brawn to go with it. Like, it's a contact sport. That's what I tell people. Like, you can't go into it thinking that you're not going to get hurt. But if you've grown up playing a bit of sport, a bit of footy, done a trade, you're generally going to be a better cut than the academic. There is different sections that are probably more suited for certain people, but I think the trade and the starting out young, there's a lot of maturity that comes with that. I sort of maintain that you probably shouldn't be joining until you're sort of 21, just based on the maturity of things that you probably see on your first day that will, can be sometimes life-changing. But if you've got a little bit of maturity, a trade background or some other skill set that you can even maybe fall back on once if you realise the police isn't for you, it's such an important thing. So
100%. And, that, as Panda said, he was like, as he said, I wouldn't have got in to the police if I hadn't done my trade. And you mentioned that you finish high school, and then you go in and do your apprenticeship as a fitter.
Yeah.
What was that like, mate? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, so I suppose when I was sort of getting to year 10, I know my father said, mate, it's either a trade or go on to year 12 just to say you've got the education and try and get a good job. He was an interstate truck driver, so he was sort of like, you really don't want to be following my footsteps. You should be following more in his brothers were quite successful. One was a businessman and one was a plastic surgeon, so he's trying to probably steer us more along their paths. So for my year 10 project, I made a box trailer from scratch and had to do a project book on it, which fortunately I took to my interview, and they sort of said, what can you offer us? And I just sort of handed them my project book. And they literally said, when do you want to start, sort of thing, because they could see I had some sort of skill. And that takes me back to, growing up, learning how to just do basic things. Like, I was lucky enough to have two older brothers and a dad that, we spent a lot of time working on Dad's truck and changing tyres and brake linings and greasing it and washing it, that you just learnt skills, whether you sort of wanted to or not. So I just sort of found that was helped me a lot to get my trade. And
did you have any, because the police comes a little bit later down
the
track
yep.
At that time, did you have any family members who'd served in either the military or police at that time, or were you the first?
Not really. I know my dad served in the Defence Force in transport, I think, but I never met him. He passed away before I was born. But, I always had a bit of an interest in serving somehow, or it was either going to be the police or the Defence Force, and lucky enough with the different, with the reserves and the police, I was able to do both, and do both at a fairly high level, looking back. So, I sort of I did work experience with the police because it was that I had that interest back in, and that was a great week. Like, it was, back in the, let me get this right, I suppose, 89, where things were a lot looser back then. Different times. So, doing ride-alongs with the police and stuff as literally a high school student was pretty cool, and it sort of, I sort of realised that, once I go and do a trade and grow up a bit, I would like to do this job. But I also had the interest in defence as well that, sort of bubbled away. And coincidentally, I actually joined defence before I joined the police.
Yeah, so in 1997, mate, you joined the 1st Commando Regiment. And how did that come about? Because in 1997, the internet didn't exist.
Yep.
So how did you go down that SF, 1st Commando Regiment? How did that path come about?
Yeah, so again, with the police side of things, I was kind of interested in like a hands-on job, and I suppose some of the things I was reading in different programs, the dog handling thing was of an interest. And living in the Newcastle area, I knew they had working dogs at the RAF base, Williamtown, so I thought that was what I was going to do, So I suppose we've moved on a bit there, but I started doing some security work. Yeah, and a mate of mine who I used to do bouncing with, he used to be in the SAS, and we got talking one night when we were working, just sort of saying how I was interested in this and that because I knew what he'd done. And he sort of said, you don't want to do that. You probably want to look at infantry or special forces. It's probably where you're going to get better training and maybe, a deployment or something like that. So that sort of got my interest. And he was able to... so his background was from the Special Air Service Regiment. So he was joining commandos on the east side when he came over. So we sort of went down for an induction night where I met the OC and the staff who were looking after new recruits, and he sort of got a job straight up because all his qualifications sort of he was qualified. And I remember the OC Dave Cameron saying, look out to that oval there, there's a heap of guys running around and like footy shorts, no shoes, no shirt, wringing wet. They'd been through the ocean or swimming down in the ocean with these ropes and ties. I was just thinking, holy shit, look at those dudes. Like they're just, man mountains and just weapons, and they were just the training guys, wanting to go through. He goes, mate, you'll be joining them once you get through all your checks and balances and stuff. So, it was... to see that, it was like, so this is fair income, seeing these guys out there getting beasted,
And so you liked what you saw, mate, and then you went, I want to be part of this.
Well, when I say I like what I saw, it probably scared me more, but certainly thought, geez, that's a challenge. And I knew they did all the, special weapons and tactics and the boating and the parachuting, and explosive stuff. So I knew that was their core skill, and what we call direct actions or raiding forces for targets and stuff. So, I knew the work interests me, but it was all about, it's one thing fantasising about joining one of these special forces unit, but to be able to go through the program, put up with what they put you through as a selection course, and then actually get selected, that was to be, the next 18 months, 2 years of my life, which is another story,
Yeah, and so because you're doing it part-time, and you obviously go down to Kabuka, and then do you do your modules as like a reserve, like you do them on weekends? Is that how you get qualified?
Yeah, well, so at the time, it was around 97, 98, so it was just when 4RAR Commando was being raised. Mm-hmm. So a few things changed with, the whole Special Forces training on the east side because, when 4RAR was raised, a lot of the instructors come from one commando who had all the roping, parachuting, boating, special weapons and tactics skill sets, along with guys from Perth. So Hans Fleur and Graham Bremer and some of those old school legends from Perth came across and raised the Commando training wing out of Holsworthy. So, we sort of fell under that umbrella for, quality control and standards whilst they were raising a regular company at the time, Bravo Company. That was just happened to be the time I joined one commando. So we'd often do courses with them over the following years to get qualified. to a Green Beret. So,
yeah, right. And when you did join in, how long was the Buka?
Sorry, yeah, so I did my IETs out of Holsworthy, so it was where, back in World War II, they used to put a lot of the, there was so many enlistments, they come up with, I think it was 2 training group, just trying to think now exactly what it was called, but yeah, we did our IETs out of there at the time, so so it was a 3-week continuous, weekends, and we were put in a section of, because the Commando induction course was quite big, so we were able to have our own section of potential commandos doing our IETs. So our platoon commander and section leaders were Green Beret commandos.
Yeah, okay.
So, yes, they followed the criteria for your IETs, but we certainly had, extra training and lessons after everyone else had knocked off. It was just the nature of, what we were sort of doing sort of thing. So, yeah, it was sort of to get us through and get us trained because, we had to get the IETs done to then do your infantry course and then do all your prep. We were sort of in a training platoon where, most weekends and time that you spent training was focused on, your bushcraft, your skills, first aid, navigation, radio, comm stuff, and fitness. So, the amount of 3.2s and 2.4s and 30 clickers I had to do just to make sure that we could pass was pretty important to try and turn up to these courses and pass as a reservist and not be, embarrassed by not passing with the regulars. So there was a high standard that they asked us to be to make sure that we got through. So, and if you weren't up to it, they wouldn't let you go on. So,
yeah. So it was, and you, being at your reserves, you guys, you obviously have to go and do selection with these guys.
Yep.
And like being a reservist, you come in on like Tuesday night and then your weekends. How did they say, right, you've got to block out a whole section for selection, or what?
Yeah,
that work?
yeah, pretty much. So, whenever there was something coming up, again, it was all, it's one thing to, you had to show commitment to it. So, they'd give you plenty of warnings. So it was important that your employee was on board with it, which I was lucky enough to have that. They were supportive of my career in the Defence Force, so, they allowed you to have the time off. So, yeah, it was just fitting in with what courses were being run and doing it that way. So, yeah.
What's your toughest memory that you can remember on selection when you were there?
Yeah, so we sort of had a, mate, it's one of those things that all blurs in, but there is moments. Like I said, we've done multiple, what we call the Commando fitness assessment, which is a combination of swimming, running, heaves, push-ups, sit-ups, rope climbs, and whatever else. But yeah, I suppose the demarcation where they literally don't feed you for 4 or 5 days and put you through, round-the-clock activities just to drain you down physically, emotionally. You haven't slept. They're barely giving you anything to eat. You really just got water to survive. So they bring you down to the bare skeleton of what you are as an individual and what sort of resolve you can muster within yourself and to, just to keep your mind ticking over for that whole, the mindset just to not give up. And that's what they want to see. They want to see you not give up and you to try and bring the guy beside you with you sort of thing. So, yeah, it was probably the demarcation phase, I'd say, yeah.
Were you ever on selection going here?
Oh, yeah, lots of times, mate, because, my life outside of that was pretty comfortable and cruisy and, and to think, what the hell am I doing here, often coming to my mind, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, did you ever think, I'm going to pull off, or was it just, what kept you going, mate, do you think?
I don't know, it's a good question because there was just something in me that just wanted to prove to myself, because often we don't talk to many people about it, and also, wanting to do it for yourself, but also wanting to do it for the guy beside you, because you know he's hurting as well, and he's putting the effort in for you, you're putting the effort in for him, although it's just all yous out in the bush and no one else really knows what you're doing, but it's working towards, passing, your Special Forces selection course, and hopefully one day getting that Green Beret and serving your country, I suppose. I suppose later in life, being on operations and the hard times I had there, you think back to your selection, and you can see the reason why it's there and why it's important, and having that mindset of no fail, not to give up, and just push yourself beyond. They're the sort of traits that they're looking for. That's what you've got to have to do this sort of work. Yeah.
And I know, because when you deployed to Afghanistan, and I've had a number of boys on from both Perth and Sydney, and they've all said it that selection, whenever they were in the hurt locker in Afghanistan,
you're drawing those hard times.
During those hard times,
Yeah.
Selection is why they always think back, well, this is why we do selection.
Yeah,
because of these hard times.
Yeah. It teaches yourself how to draw on those, the frame of mind that you got to sort of be in to then go, right, I'm in that phase, and it's about just one step after the other, and and to try and reflect and compare, and I'm talking about situations that you might be fatigued, cold, and you just lost a mate. You can't train for that sort of stuff.
No.
Although it's there for a reason, you probably slightly tasted the difficulties of it when it's all happening around you. It's very different, yeah.
And at that point, so when you pass selection, are you thinking, I love this, I'm going to go full-time, or are you just happy staying down that part-time role that you
Yeah, well, at the time, I suppose I did join the reserves with the focus of, joining the police as well. Because at the time I was still a fitter, and our unit had a lot of cops in it, from the tactical units and all different walks of life in the police. And I thought, this sounds really cool, I'll do both. The opportunity, well, I suppose I'll digress a bit. I'll go back that when I got through the selection and qualified, within only about a year or two, we were offered to go to Timor with the regulars, with 4RAR, which a lot of guys did, but that was when I had my application in with the police. So I'd had a bit of trouble getting in with the police because of my driving record growing up. I was a bit of a hoon, believe it or not. So when I got the offer, I thought I'd better do this and do it ASAP, just get through the training, because, it was 2001. I was at the academy, and I know you'll probably get to it, when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
So not only were I'd sort of knocked back to go to Timor to join the police, now we're talking about the global war on terror. Not that I really thought that we'd be involved with that. However, I suppose you could see things starting to spin up, and being part of a Special Forces unit, the round out reinforced to 4RAR, which is now 2 Commando, it's pretty evident to us that, the potential to go when they go as a backup or reserve was pretty clear, because it was happening already for Timor 1 in 2001. So the thought of going full time over my career did come to me a couple of times. However, we could sort of see that, they might go straight up, but will potentially come in as, again, either rounding out within teams to 2 Commando, or being asked to form our own teams or platoon to assist, kind of like what we call Timor 2 in 2006. I was able to deploy with 4RAR then, so we'll get to that.
Later. I want to highlight to the listener too, Fergs, that when you joined the military, you joined in peacetime. So when the balloon went up in 99 for INAFED,
yep.
you're, like most people think, this is because there was a few deployments here and there in the 90s of Somalia and the Rwanda and Timor had popped up. So when you joined it in peacetime. And who would have had a crystal ball to see that over the next 20 years it would become our busiest period of time in a lot of years.
Yeah, that's right. I suppose what a lot of listeners may not know, and there were little jobs going on whether there was coups or different things. So we had guys, without going into too much on these specific sort of smaller team missions, so those things were sort of happening that aren't sort of well known of within the Solis or Fiji or different other regional AOs. So it was a time of, I suppose, a peace training defence force, but definitely changed. And I suppose it's, if you hadn't deployed, if you were in the defence force or even reserves over those years and you haven't deployed, I don't know what you were doing, because there was opportunities everywhere. So
absolutely. And it definitely got busy, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And you mentioned in 2001 you joined the New South Wales Police, and what was that process like back then in 2001? Because the internet had slowly just come in.
Yeah.
Talk me through that process back in 2001.
Yeah, well, I suppose I'd met a lot of cops in the Commando unit, good guys, could see, they talk about some of the jobs they were working on and different things, and I'd had that spark from a young age. So I thought, I've definitely got to do this, just to tick those boxes. And then, just the application process, getting interviewed, doing your medical, physical, and then getting a letter of offer to go down and start. So I was January of 2001. So like I was saying, by the time September 11 come around, I was in the final phases of my training at the academy. Literally was studying that night and got up to have a toilet break, and guys are watching telly in the muster room, just seeing the planes into the tower. It was like, the hell's going on here, I thought it was a movie to start with. And then, obviously that day changed the world for as we are the same. That's it.
When you're at the academy, because, as you said at the start of the podcast, schooling wasn't your cup of tea. How did you go at the academy? Because you got to learn all this legislation, all the laws. Yeah. Was it hard? Yeah.
Well, it was challenging in some ways. I hadn't spent much time in books and study and essay writing and quoting, and, it's got to be done a certain way. So I had to do a bit of work around that. Again, as a fitter or a hands-on sort of mechanic, my typing skills were pretty average, so working on that. But mate, it was just rope learning stuff. I had to put a bit extra time into it, but a lot of the physical stuff was fine, and hands-on stuff was okay. I got a couple of awards down there, so I did pretty good as a tradie. I got a check for it was $400 or $500 for the SPAC assessments, which is a simulated police or simulated practice assessment criteria or something, whatever it stood for. It was literally your reality scenarios where you get tested on, your presentation, your talking, or your communication, your use of your legislations and all that sort of stuff. So so I was fortunate enough to win that award, and me and another guy had a shootout for the best shot of the course. Unfortunately, drink and drill week caught up with me a bit that week, so I was not quite on my game. But anyway, so I didn't get my name on the board down at the academy, which And
at that point, was it 8 months, and were you paid for your training, or did that stop?
Nah, I think that had stopped. We were through the phase where it had gone to the university course, and they were offering scholarships for, you had to do a financial declaration. Again, because I'd worked for 10 years as a fitter, I was doing quite well financially. Trace and I, my wife, and So we'll sort of set up. So doing the financial declaration, which I was, open and honest, I didn't qualify for the scholarship, so I had to pay myself through, which, it's a fair whack when you're going a year without an income.
New South Wales is the only, the police force that doesn't pay their recruits.
Yeah, I understand it's changed now, but and that's the thing. Like, I know a lot of people who probably would have joined up if they could afford to sort of go, on a reduced income to get through the study, but they just couldn't afford it. But, again, like I said, I worked towards it and financed it about right to get through, so that sort of helped me.
Well, you mentioned your beautiful wife, Trace. I know Trace.
Yeah.
Did you meet her in between your commando and the police time?
Nah, when I was back on the tools as a fitter at the local university, which a lot of us local fellas would go down there and sniff around looking for potential wives or girlfriends. But so I met her there, and then fostered a nice relationship, and got to know her more and realised how much of a beautiful person she was. And we started going out, and so we were married quite young before I joined both the police and defence. But we've got two beautiful children that are now 22 and 20 as a result of that. That are going great guns, super proud of them. But
you know what they say, mate, behind every good man is neither better a woman or an angel, and Trace is that, mate.
Oh, she is, mate. She's a beautiful person. I love her dearly. She's been an outstanding mother. I think a lot of people could take a note out of her book.
Well, she's gone on the journey with you.
She has, mate, and it's been has had her own struggles with me being away with the kids, and and it's and mothers and fathers who see their kids go off to combat. It's like knowing having my own children, if they were to do that, it'd be so hard. And they're the unsung heroes, really. Like, we go and do the job, we get the medals and whatever else, but without them holding the fort back home, knowing that they got everything in hand, they're intelligent, switched on, they've got everything sorted, makes it so much easier to deploy and keep your mind on the job.
Well, I recently had Emma Donaldson on. That has been one of the most downloaded podcasts, because people were just blown away by the other side, the wife and the partner side. Yeah,
there should be. I encourage you to do more about the other side, because your listener base is probably made up of veterans and their partners. That there's the hard stuff is the stuff at home when you're away, and they're just constantly worrying. I know Trace had a few moments of fear and terror, literally seeing cars drive up the road, and she just, out the front yard playing with the kids, where she's thought, oh my God, is this... She just had a feeling that this was it, and they drive slowly looking at... It's probably a real estate agent, looking at houses or whatever. And she'd tell me later on that, it just made her burst into tears, and it's like, geez, that must have been hard, And your mission focus, you're away... Well, you don't know about this stuff until you get home and have those discussions. And,
that's right.
The kids would look up at her and say, "What's wrong, Mummy? You're crying." And she'd just have to say, "Oh, it's okay. I kicked my toe or something," just throw off. But just tough, mate, on them. So, full respect and admiration to wives and mothers and parents, or partners, should I say, of service people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, 2001, mate, you finally march out of the academy and get the family down. Proud moment for you, and do you think that your military training definitely helped with the police academy? You found it?
Oh, yes and no, mate. I suppose I had the fitness base there and weapon handling stuff, but I suppose what was probably more significant, I think we skipped over it when I was awarded my Green Beret.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Prior to joining the police. Same thing, had my family there. Special Operations Commander Australia, Sokost, was there to present our berets with, all his entourage. So that was quite a significant day. It was probably 2.5 years in the making. We started off with over 100 guys, and 16 of us got our berets. Yeah, and I'm quite very good mates with most of those guys still today.
Well, you've gone on the journey together.
Yeah. Well, we've all sort of, there's a few in particular that sort of, stayed on, and we like to get photos together because we were, there was 16 of us then, but when we went on to deploy, the number had gotten less and less. So there was, I think there was about 5 or 6 of us on our last rotation that we actually joined the commandos together. So, just special dudes, mates for life, and you easy to say that you love them, you know what I mean? Because you've just been through so much together. They're like brothers. There's non-stop banter. It's just, great mates, yeah.
So you got the Sherwood Green Beret, and recently I've seen they've changed the colour. Why was that? What's changed?
Well, there was, I suppose, a new role come about, which is, I suppose I can talk about. It's fairly well known, the Special Warfare role, which encompasses a lot of stuff. It was probably better suited to one commando. So, like I said, it's the early days. I'd probably not really qualified to be talking about it that much. I've done the Special Warfare training courses, but due to some injuries and medical condition that I've got, I've had to step away from it. So, that's the reason that come about, and it's obviously just a different role now to the 079 Commando offensive raiding / special recovery role that we always had. It's now a Special Warfare, which is training, advising, assisting other nations' forces.
Are you a fan of the change in the colour of the beret, mate, or are you still love like your traditional, the green beret?
That's what I am, mate. That's the training I done. Yeah, we were the original custodians of the Green Beret from when it originally started from the Royal Marine Commandos back in 55. So, when the raising of 4 RAR or 2 Commando, they took on, I suppose, our coloured beret, which was an extension, obviously, of the Royal Marine and the Australian Commando skill set, which they become. So, it's a complex one. It's I do get and understand how the evolution has evolved, from what they are now, or both units are now, to what they have been over the years. Like most sections or units or organisations, the evolution has just advanced so much, especially in this last 20 years of the Afghan campaign. Where the lessons learnt and how we've evolved working with other coalition special forces, US or UK, and the training exchanges that go on. We've evolved, and we're in a really good place too. Yeah.
And I know you're proud of your beret, and so you bloody should be, mate.
Oh, mate, hard earned that bugger.
Blood, sweat, and tears went into that.
Yeah.
And so you have that proud moment where you bring the family down to receive your green beret, and then the academy coming down again.
Yeah.
That would have been a proud moment too, because you, as you said, the idea of the police has been there for a long, long time.
Yeah.
March out, and did you march out in summer or winter?
Summer. It was late December, so we had a few people face plant on the parade ground, that's for sure. But it was great, mate. It was it was good just to get it done and get out working. It just seemed to be you're doing classes and all your practicals for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then you get where you're posted to, which I went to Ku-ring-gai, Hornsby area, north of Sydney.
Was that your first post? That was where you wanted to go?
Yeah, well, you sort of get offered, how was it? There was 5 different areas. I think you had to pick like a Sydney metro area. Jeez, you're testing me now. But you had to also pick a north.
Yeah.
So north, like Gosford to Tweed. And then from, I think it was Goulburn to Albury. Yeah, so you had to pick.
Like a country posting.
Yeah, so you potentially could have been sent anywhere, but what they do and what they did is that if you've got a mortgage on a house, wife and kids in a school, in jobs, they would generally look after those, and often more probably senior people, not senior people, mature people, older people, and try and get you closer to home or on the train line to that area. Young singlies would often go bang in the city or out west. Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get on the train line to Ku-ring-gai down from where I was living at the time on Lake Macquarie.
Yeah, and did you feel ready from your training in the academy? And you'd had life experience at this point, so did you feel ready to go into the big, bad, dangerous world of policing at that time?
Yeah, pretty well, mate. Yeah, and I know I hadn't talked that much about it, but I'd done nearly 9 years of security work, bouncing at clubs, so I'd had heaps of fights. I knew how to handle myself. I knew how to talk to people.
Well, it's a skill, isn't it?
Well, you learn that you'd rather talk than
fight.
That's for sure. So absolutely, I was ready to go, and just being a bit more mature as well. Like I was 26 when I joined. I'd done the whole Special Forces selection stuff, so I had skills and maturity behind me that, I wasn't sort of concerned at all.
And do you remember your first shift and because when you got your firearms, did you actually take them home with you and take them to, or were they at the station? Or?
Yeah, no, so when you finish up at the academy, you're dismissed, and everyone's, depending if you're a long distance traveller or whatever, I'm not sure how they did it, but for me, from Goulburn back to Hornsby, it was a direct travel straight back. You're sworn in at that point as a probationary constable of police, so the responsibility is all of a sudden yours, so you're literally taking your stuff straight back to the police station. They are kind of expecting you because they know the passing out parade happened that day, so you lob up there and lock your stuff up and touch base with someone to give you some instruction about when you're to turn up next. And obviously with most probationers, it's the following Monday or Tuesday for like a 3-day induction where you sort of get spoken to from the boss, the EDO, what they expect of you, and then you kind of get broken up into teams, and then you get pretty well get put on a roster, and off you go, mate, in the big bad world of policing.
And mate, I always talk to police veterans that I have on and talk about FTOs. How important is it to get? They can pretty well make or break a career, can't they, if they're a lazy FTO?
Yes, yeah, that's right. It's pretty important, and I think we've come a long way. That senior people know by appointing a bad FTO doesn't really potentially make you good staff underneath you. You appoint your good staff as FTOs because you want them to be like them and not like the others that aren't so good. So I was lucky enough to have 2 pretty good FTOs. Katrina O'Connor, she's a great bird. She works up here in Lake Macquarie. I'm sure she got frustrated with my typing skills and spelling and stuff at times, but she's a great chick. I'm still in contact with her these days. And my second FTO was Scotty McVicker, who fortunately passed away, must be 6 or 7 years ago, through suicide, unfortunately. So, yeah.
And you mentioned that, mate, that a number of your friends that have, from the job, have, unfortunately it seems to happen too often, and through the trauma of what you guys see on a day-to-day basis, and let's hope, mate, in the future that there maybe is a Royal Commission into police and first responders.
Yeah, well, it's one of those complex things. It's we all know we're getting into that job and we're going to see and do some horrific things, but when you're there seeing it and doing it, it is pretty tough, mate. And I think it was pointed out to me that I went on to become a detective, so most deaths, for example, we got to go on oversight. So you might, on a 4-day, we do 10-hour shifts, so a 4-day block, you might go to 2 or 3, 2 in a day, then 1, or you might not go to 1 the next day. But if you do the maths on that over a 23-year career, you're 3,000 to 4,000 deceased, and I'm talking from homicides to suicides to SIDS to sometimes motor vehicle accidents. Very young children committing suicide, hanging up. You're looking at them like they're as old as your own children. Or, I've been to pregnant ladies hanging up, committing suicide. It's just a tough gig, mate. Yeah,
it is, and that's why, mate, I do the podcast, because to let the public know how bloody hard the job is. It's not, and most people's interaction with police, as you said earlier on in the podcast, was when they're at their worst, they need the police, they need the emergency services, and most have an interaction with the highway patrol.
90% of our community will deal with the highway patrol, and they're probably going to get a ticket out of it. So their probably experience with the police isn't so good, but a lot of us that work in serious crime or major crime, we're dealing with 1% of the population who are, the ones that you see on the news every night that you go, why don't they just lock them up, or why don't they just do whatever to them? Yeah, well, that's another thing. But, so it's, it's a lot of our efforts and focus is on, 1 or whatever the stats is, 2% of the population consume 100% of our time.
So you get to Hornsby, Ku-ring-gai, you're in that LAC. What are some of the jobs that you're getting in that, that demographic of Hornsby, Ku-ring-gai areas? You getting as a GDs?
Yeah, so, obviously domestics, motor vehicle accidents, a lot of robberies. Yeah, they're sort of the main ones for in and around there. Break and enters, aggravated break and enters, home invasions and stuff, sort of, and those sort of jobs went on to the Ds, and that's sort of what sort of sparked my interest, is that, you go to these jobs and you're sort of taking the report from, knowing that the Ds are going to pick up that job and go along with it, investigate it further and potentially lock them up. So you're sort of not really seeing the job fully through. Domestics become, a mundane thing. Motor vehicle accidents become a mundane thing. And it soon made me realise that I want to get into the more serious investigations and locking up real criminals, if you know what I mean. So, and in those early years, I was lucky enough to get on some, whilst I was in uniform. I did uniform for about 2 years, I think it was, 2.5 years maybe. Bearing in mind, I've gone back at times to do relieving and whatever else, but just lucky in Sydney that the opportunities come up more regularly to do courses, to specialise, so I just took advantage of that. So I was able to do my, what we called OSG course, which is like a riot squad as you know it these days. And back then we used to do all the medium risk search warrants, public order response stuff, big concerts and different things. Also did my police coxswain course, so water police for the Hawkesbury River, Barrera Waters area. Also got on a dignitary protection course, which I did a lot with them over the years, and more later assisted with training those guys how to shoot better and sort of room combat, working or the first aid side of things as well, casualty care. Well, that's kind of why I was sort of brought in to help out in that area, because I did have some skills to pass on, and they were gracious enough to take that on board. But so a lot of courses earlier on in my career, and then eventually got on the D's course.
We'll talk about that shortly.
Yeah.
When you did your coxswain's course, being that you're in the Hornsby Ku-ring-gai area, I'm guessing you would have had to use that a lot. Like you would have been out.
Yeah. Yeah, so we used to have to look after the waterways in and around the Hawkesbury River, the big Hawkesbury River Bridge there. That was all our area, Brow waters, and sometimes ran into pit waters to help out the water police with, whether it's a search and rescue or a drowning, or even domestics or whatever else to some of the islands within those waterways. And if the GDs had to go, they needed someone to drive the boat. So, you'd be called up on the radio who's a boat driver and off you'd go. So we used to have I think it was like a 10-metre Shark Cat twin engine boat at Brow. Yeah, and off we'd go. It was good.
And do you remember your first arrest, or did they just all blur into one?
Yeah, I think my first actual arrest was like a shoplifter at Westfields at Hornsby, but I do remember a pretty significant one where there was a foot pursuit involved. So it was these guys that used to cruise around doing ATM rips, so literally rip ATMs out of... Yeah, and they'd have like a WRX and a white van to be able to put the ATM in, and there used to be like 3 or 4 of them that would do it. And we literally drove across one night and busted them in the act, which turned into a big foot pursuit and an arrest. But yeah, I literally chased this guy a few hundred metres down the road and found myself I was chasing 2 of them and then ran into these bushes and then found myself sort of one-on-one with this guy who had a screwdriver. Was saying, F you and this and that and whatever else. And I just, thought, what's the best thing to do here? It was, like I said, I was only not long out of the academy. I knew I had all my appointments, batons and sprays and guns and whatever else, but I suppose the old knuckling days come back to me and, kind of did a bit of a fakey thing with my leg to make him think I was going to kick him, and then hit him, and then kicked him, and then just, towel him up pretty much to effect the arrest. It was one of those things that I unfortunately got challenged at court for using excessive force. But he come to a court with his lawyer with a doctor's certificate because I think I'd split his eye open. I think I busted his nose or something, but I'd also ruptured his testicle when I kicked him. And but at the end of the day, like a pointed or knife object, you could be justified in drawing a firearm, and because he was lunging at me as if trying to force me back so he could create some space to run. I just sort of started whacking into him before he had that chance, sort of thing. So it could have been a lot worse. And
I had Zach Roth on.
Yeah.
Very similar circumstances.
That's right, mate. Yeah.
To be pulled into court, I'm sorry, mate. He's a criminal. He's got a screwdriver. So that's a bladed weapon that can kill you.
Yeah, pointed or bladed. That's right. Oh, that no doubt in the world, mate. Like it was probably, because they were trying to jimmy open the door on the service station. So it was a really long sort of, probably would have been 300 or 400 mil long. So it was a big screwdriver.
Yeah.
So if he had hit me with it, it probably would have penetrated if he lunged at me. Anyway, long story short, I gave him a hiding and arrested him, and it was all good because he was armed, and the Squizzy Taylor, who was our prosecutor, rest in peace, old Squizzy, but he sold it pretty good to the defence, saying, you're lucky your client's still here to talk about his sore nuts as opposed to being shot. But anyway, that's another story.
Wow. And that happens, mate. And do you remember at this point you deal with a lot of death throughout your, as you said, up to 3,000 deaths. Do you remember your first death? And was there much support back then in giving death notices, or did that improve as your career went on, or was there not? It was really that was lacking.
So, a couple of questions there. I do remember my first deceased, which was just an elderly person passed away. But, as time went on, there was more sort of significant type of, suicides or train jobs or even motor vehicle accidents where children were killed. So, those ones are the ones that probably affect you the most. And the SIDS one where, perfectly little baby, beautiful little babies just, unfortunately passing away, and then you've got to console, deal with the family. Yeah, they're the ones that sort of stick with you because it's the emotional that you take on board. Like a dead body to me now, it is what it is. Like you're seeing that many, you become so accustomed to it. But the little ones, or where there's emotion involved around the death is what seems to...
It would have got worse when you became a dad yourself, right?
Yeah, that's right, mate. And, circumstances of different jobs that you go to, whether you can kind of see, offences against children. Like I worked in that area for a while with, child sex offenders. And, you just become very aware of people, not trusting, because like I said, I've locked up, teachers, doctors, priests, all sorts from all walks of lives where, we all put a lot of trust in those people because of the position that they hold, let alone they're committing offences behind your back. Yeah, they're hard ones to deal with too.
And when you join the police, I know a lot of police that I've spoken to often say that the view of how they see the world changes very quickly. It's black and white. They're all bad until they're proven good, or there's no grey.
Yeah.
Did you have that as well, or did your perception change?
Yeah, it did, mate, because, it's hard to explain to, the listener who probably hasn't worked in that space or doesn't understand it. But like I said before, you're dealing, or you come across people who you put a lot of faith in. You're generally your 1% of criminals that are criminals, you see them straight away and you have a distrust because they're a thief or a robber or a murderer or whatever the case may be. But people that are holding positions of trust and they've gone outside of that and you're arresting them through the course of your investigation and laying charges, it soon makes you very sceptical and cynical of everything and everyone.
And how important is it, mate, and we'll probably get down to that later on, but to maintain friends in the job, but then also have friends outside of the job? How important is it to have that?
Yeah, that's a good question, or a good point as well. It is important because, like I said, I worked a lot of years. I've got mates in the Defence Force, even good mates that I used to work with on the tools. You've got a lot in common with those guys because, you might like motorbikes or cars and stuff together, which is still an interest. But, you do seem to, the more you're in the police or work with police, you have these tough moments, big jobs, it brings you close. It's the camaraderie and the friendships you make are very special, and you're often socialising a lot with those people, be it birthdays or farewells or whatever else, because, my experience and some of the people I've worked with, absolutely amazing people and are friends for life. You just get each other. You've come this far in life doing a tough job in the interest of, keeping your community safe, and potentially enforcing the law. That sounds a bit over the top, but it's sort of hard to explain that if everything you're doing from the moment you get to work is about potentially locking someone up for something, so if you're ever on the hunt, you're forever trying to get your paperwork together or your evidence together to go and lock someone up. It's a tough job, and it does bring you close to the people that you work with.
And I think too that, mate, you're putting your life on the line every day. Like, there's, as you say, you're taking on the 1% of the bad people that are, that are in society.
Yeah.
95% of the society doesn't see. You're hunting these guys, and you are risking your life. Like,
Yeah.
you know, there was no day, and mate, you know, you've lost a lot of friends, a lot of colleagues. Right through Australia, there's been men and women who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service. It's a dangerous job. It's not, you know, you're not going to a normal office job. Like, you're dealing with fluid and dynamic situations that go from 0 to 100.
Yep.
Like that. So, yeah, it is a day, you know, and you're risking your life to protect the community.
Yeah.
That's the hard part too. That, you know, and that's why we do these podcasts to have, you know, to highlight what you guys go through, mate. And it's not a normal job.
No, that's right. No, it's it does change you. There's no doubt about that. That's the important thing, is to try and remove yourself from, you know, the permanent emotion, the permanent sort of hype that you get with the work. You know, if you can manage that, you know, a good work-life balance, and being able to leave your stuff at work is important. I've sort of found with my work in the detectives that, yeah, it's kind of, you're on your days off, you're getting called from work about this or this person, or the DPP is calling you. You're kind of not really ever letting it go. Where I found in uniform, you could kind of let it go more, because the next people are there to take on the radio, and that's sort of what you're going
you
to.
Do your shift and then
hand it all over,
as being a detective, it sort of follows you home, and it sort of consumes your life. And
yeah, well, if you've got an operation or a controlled op or something running where you've got, you know, phone intercepts on or trackers or whatever else, you know, people have got to either do them for you, or you've got to go in and, you know, catch up on that stuff. Yeah, it's very time consuming, and, you know, your team or someone who might be covering that for you are ringing you saying, oh, you know, they're talking about this or they're about to do that, and then you've got to, you know, literally come up with what you're going to do about it, you know, because you can't just sort of let that stuff go. But, without sort of getting into it too much.
And you're actually, mate, and I want to highlight this because you received 2 commissioners' commendations. And, what were they for?
Oh, they were for the Quarryfield riots. It was a public order incident where, a couple of crooks had stole a car, had a motor vehicle accident, and all the locals then turned on the police that were there, and it turned into quite a civil unrest area for Macquarie Field, which went on for a number of days. So, you know, we were sort of called up to respond to that in a public order riot capacity, and literally for, you know, the first sort of nights and days, just being pelted with Molotov cocktails and rocks and bricks and tiles and different projectiles. You know, it was, in hindsight, I think some of the hierarchy were criticised a bit, as opposed to not allowing us to, you know, to rush and make those mass arrests. I think the department learned a lot about mass arrests and different things through that operation. You know, things could have been a lot different if they allowed us to do it. But
I remember that. I remember watching that on the news.
Yeah, it was pretty hectic.
It was pretty hectic.
Yeah.
And I remember actually watching live, cocktails thrown, and you guys were standing with your bar shield.
Yeah.
And it literally had to step. I remember that as a young kid. Right?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a good, you know, as you say, mate, you never do it for the medals. But it's nice to be recognised with the commissioner's, you know, citation, which is...
Yeah, it is a funny one. And so there was that one, and there was also which went on for a lot longer.
Yeah, I remember them too.
Yeah, that was, it was pretty wild as well. But, both sort of public order response sort of jobs. But, you know, and a lot of guys or listeners who might be in the police or emergency service, like I've done, you know, 10 or 20 more significant, probably more, either significant jobs, arrests or pursuits or different things where, you know yourself, there was more in that than there was in that, but obviously this is what was recognised as a thing, and commissioners...
You mentioned you do detectives course in this little time frame
Yeah.
as well. And you mentioned earlier on the podcast that the detectives are somewhere that you wanted to go. How hard, because I remember speaking to Panda about it, how hard was your detectives course? Was that an intense, because it's you're learning different parts to becoming a general duties police officer. How hard was that?
Yeah, well, you're delving more into different lots of legislations to assist you in doing your investigative work. So, you know, the Surveillance Devices Act, you know, the Evidence Act, you know, these sort of pieces of legislations become more and more important as to, you know, how to use them, when to use them, and, you know, asset confiscation. There's just so many pieces of legislation and tools that we use as serious or major crime investigators that most of the police or people don't even know about. You know, I often say to some of these uniforms that they just don't know what they don't know. They see us doing our thing in suits and whatever else and sort of scratch their head as to what the hell do you guys do. But I'd invite any of them to do the course and do the work that we do as detectives. I soon realise that, you know, you're not just, you're carrying 20 or 30 cases of serious crime, you know, Table 1, strictly indictable matters, and also, you know, child sex offenders, even some internal investigations, you know, that they don't know that stuff's going on. So there's a lot in it.
So do you go back to the academy to do your training, and how long is your training to then, obviously you've got to go away and do coursework, and then you sit the final exam to then get signed off that yes, you're actually designated detective?
Yeah, pretty much. It goes for about 18 months. I know it's evolved a little bit over the years, but yeah, certain subjects are sort of covered off, but yeah, and each of those subjects have exams to go with them. So
do you get a special badge then? Like, do they change?
Well, yeah, that's a funny one. The haters will hate that, but yeah, we do actually. It's not gold. Should be, but nah. It's it's mainly because we're plain clothes. So they've come up with this badge that we wear on our belts next to our firearms, so people can see the firearm and then see the badge and relate it to being a police officer. Otherwise, you know, for many years it was literally a lanyard around your neck to identify. You know, because if you don't have a name tag on or some sort of visual ID, people just see the firearm and, well, can only assume that you're a cop.
Yeah.
So the detective's badge is it's a relevant and needed thing.
Because I know in Queensland they've got the gold. If you become a detective, you get the gold badge.
Yeah.
And you know, and I spoke to, when I had Panda on, he said, "No, mate, we just had a piece of paper." But he said that was a sought after piece of paper.
Oh, absolutely.
You guys, for you get the badge, and it's so. Do you then work out, well, I want to go, because I know some detectives go, I want to go down to their homicide detective, I want to go to the drug squad. Do you get assigned, it's like you go back to being like a GDs of detectives? Is that how it works? Or do you specifically choose to go somewhere?
Well, once you start your training, you're sort of assigned a position within a detective's office. So you've done an initial assessment, which is called a bull ring, or I'm sure it's called something else now. We always like to change names of shit, but yeah. So that's kind of your spot, and the idea is to obviously get yourself through the D's course, and then, you know, I suppose if you don't, you probably don't hold that position anymore. But you know, once you get through, you know, that's your position within that office. But if you wanted to transfer to either another district, another section, be it in State Crime Command, who generally specialise in crime categories, you know, it's a matter of applying, getting selected and going. So, yeah, you know, for me, you know, I was working in Sydney for a lot of years, being on the north side, you know, living up in the Lake Macquarie area. You know, to go any closer, like I did spend time at, you know, what we call strike forces, major investigations, where it might be for weeks or months, working on homicides. I think I mentioned a few there, you know, or different armed hold-up units, robbery units. So, you can do that if you want. For me, bearing in mind I was still doing my army stuff, so I was away a lot. I was trying to get closer to home, to be home when I could more often, to juggle both my commando career and also my detective career.
And you mentioned that you're juggling both. Were the police accommodating and helping you out, or were they...
Oh, yes and no. Like, it's they want you there, and Army wants you to give them heaps of time, so it's whoever you sort of... there's an obligation to do a certain amount with each of them. Just lucky enough, there is legislation to support you. We get, I think it was like 6 weeks a year off to do Army time, and if you were deploying on a continuous full-time contract, you would be given a letter, go to your boss, and they'd have to sign off because it was legislated that they had to, you've had a call out or a call up to deploy, and they'd have to allow you to go. So towards the end, it got a bit better. I had a few issues earlier on with bosses not allowing me to go when I was asked, so obviously then I had to go above them and call on some other friends to pull a bit of rank and make it happen. So yeah.
And you mentioned you worked on some strike forces, and when you were a detective, and you worked with, as I mentioned off air, you worked with Russell Oxford, and I'm actually good friends with his niece and grew up with, so made a small circle that you got to work with the likes of Russ and some other amazing detectives.
Yeah, that was that one was Lauren Huxley, I think her name was.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a terrible job. She was at home, and I think his name was Farmer. I'm just trying to get my thoughts around that one.
Yeah, she came home and he was an intruder, and he brutally bashed her and then threw petrol on her and set her alight.
Yeah, so that, with doing the initial response and working on that strike force for a number of weeks, it was what we called there was no real connection between them. But the forensic evidence through that particular investigation was, through the foot impressions and other DNA evidence was so important that sort of led it to evolve to what it was. So again, working with detectives that are like, some of the best in the state, like Russell, it was just good to learn from,
And I want to move forward, mate, so in 2003 you head back to the Army, so you're doing your courses with the Commandos, and then I'll go forward to 2006, and you deploy for the first time. You've been wanting a deployment, and you deployed at Timor. How did this come about, and how long were you over there for?
Yeah, so I suppose since, when I did join, you had to sort of maintain qualifications every year, which I did. So, those early years were pretty busy, especially with the raising of 4RAR. Obviously the government saw the need to raise another Special Forces units, which kind of prompted us to raise capability and keep up with that growth of the Commando skill set. So, we were pretty busy chasing, the new skill sets that were coming about and being designed from SASR. So, it was a busy time completing your CQB courses, your demolitions courses, your boat course, para course, all your airborne roping stuff, and then your medics, DEMS and SIGs, amongst a lot of other courses. And so to be fully qualified and maintaining a status of high ready, you could be... So we got paid a bonus to be at a high ready, so you had an agreement that if they called upon you, you were at a shorter notice to move. So I think we're at 7 days, and that period would come down lesser. And then when Timor 2 kicked off, 4RAR went over in May, April, that was only meant to be for a few weeks, if that. And then what sort of transpired there is that kept going on for a long time. And no doubt, as you know, Afghanistan was up and running, SOTGs were starting to deploy from the regular commandos, so therefore you can sort of see how reserve commandos started to backfill positions in both Afghan and Timor. So yeah, I was offered a rotation to Timor in 2006, so I spent about 4 months over there.
You're chasing Alfredo Renato?
Yeah. Well, there was, him and all his cronies. They're up to some pretty wild stuff. And, so it was working up to a resolution phase that I think some of you guys you've had on spoke about that, where the Battle of Same come about and that raid went in. Yeah, so, a great opportunity to be, first operation in, what we call as, not highly kinetic like Afghanistan warfighting was. However, still a threat postured and, incorporating all our infantry minor tactics, SCEDs, and just generally operating on operations as opposed to, you can train this stuff as much as you want. And our training was good. It was at that level where once you go on operations, it's sort of the same, so...
it's just muscle memory.
Yeah.
You just, and
all the processes.
You missed out on the first team in effect.
Yeah.
You
join the cops.
Join the police.
Yeah.
To finally get that deployment, it would have been rewarding for you as well to be, and you come, so you're over there, you're doing the job, you come back, and did you think at that point, you think, that's the one deployment, like Afghanistan's, it's there, but they're not going to send us at that point? Did you think, that's the one deployment I've got?
Oh, not really. I was certainly open to, because you've got to understand the length and the efforts and the money that they spend on you. Like, it's over $2 million to get your commando up to a deployable level sort of thing. So, you're not there just to, feel the line sort of thing. You're there to be used upon when you need it. So, I sort of felt that whenever my unit, being one commando regiment, one company, was ever called to deploy, that I would, whilever I was there, would deploy with them. It's just, it's what we are there to do. It's what is required of us. So that's what I was prepared to do. So, so that was a great trip. I, again, worked with some really good guys from 2 Commando and good mates from my unit. We integrated with their teams and had a pretty good trip. Still got really good mates from that then.
And then, so you come back, you go back to the police, so you've had a 4-month deployment, you go back to the police, you're working back, being a detective, and then maybe in 2008, SOCOM came calling and a deployment to Afghanistan was on the horizon, mate, and how did that come about for you guys to be deployed over there? And been exciting. Yeah,
it was pretty exciting times, mate. It was a similar sort of thing, like identifying that the regulars had done a number of rotations and they wanted to start supplementing either individuals or teams, or operation was as a whole company group through a rotation over there. But I was just going to raise earlier with the police side of things. I was doing a lot of work with a dignitary protection unit. Fortunate enough to get on their course, pass it, get through. And over the time I was offered jobs to go there full time. Again, they were a Sydney-based unit. I was living up in Lake Macquarie Hunter area, so it was a fair travel commitment to do that full time, but fortunate enough to work on some pretty big jobs with them. And one notable one was APEC in 2007, I think it was. On the Russian detail. So working alongside or within the security detail of Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov. Obviously taking them around to different meetings with, Bush, Chinese president, and, all these high flyers, like being in and amongst those guys, the security teams, the air was pretty thick, and, it was just an interesting space.
as we speak.
Yeah, well, that's right. Look where we're at now with all those names. But I really enjoyed that work. Like when you're sort of on your game, you're on your game. I know we live in a fairly safe country, but it was really interesting. It was really good. Yeah.
And I'm glad you highlighted that, because then when the call comes to go to deploy to Afghan, do you do your pre-workup exercises to deploy? And did you, because you deployed in 2006 to East Timor, Afghanistan is going, like, it's in the news every day.
Yeah, it's ramping right up. Yep.
Yeah, and do you have this conversation with Trace to say, this is very different to East Timor?
Yeah.
How is she with you deploying over to Afghan for the first time?
Yeah, well, I suppose the whole, conversations went down that this has been offered. It's obviously a requirement of us to be in the unit. It's still a voluntarily thing to volunteer for it. But again, having the conversations about what that rotation, how it will look a little bit different to the last one. And, again, we'd already started to take casualties by 2008 and 9. So she knew, again, commandos, offensive, direct action, face-to-face with the enemy, in a lot of gunfights. So, she understood. I don't think she liked to hear it, but, it's the reality of it. You can't be sort of beating around the bush too much. But, so you kind of, depending on what position you're held within the company group, whether you're a team member, a team commander, or a specialist within the teams, sort of depending on what time you come on. So I come on a bit earlier to do a couple of courses in relation to the position that I held. One of the ones that we did a lot of was obviously the medic side of things, just because of the chances of taking casualties are a lot higher. We did a lot of advanced medical stuff, some stuff that I can't really talk about. And also I did a tactical site exploitation course. So once we get on target, I sort of took over with dealing with all the detainees and then questioning them. So I was a tactical questioner and literally processing the site with evidence, connecting people to certain weapons or whatever the case may be, photographing, biometrics, uploading. So so to do that stuff I had to come on a bit earlier. So most guys would do a year of full-time service, which incorporate the lead-up training, MREs in South Australia, and all the other pieces that you'd have to do as teams, platoons to company level preparation, working with mortars, air support, the whole kit and caboodle, getting ticked off and then deploying.
So, and this next part where we talk about is a tough part, and this trip you don't go unscathed. You lose 2 good blokes, and when you deployed in back end of 2008 into 2009, what was the mission profile that you guys were assigned to do? Were you guys go and do your DAs, targeting, and were you at this point? You were still. Did you have air assets at that point, or were you in the Bushmasters and the old
SRVs?
Yeah.
Well, as far as our mobility went, we obviously, primarily with the ground assault, if it was, a window of operations that were going out into particular areas, we'd roll out as a ground assault. We did have Chinooks and, that we could use as insertion from there. So we could, a time-sensitive thing had come up, we could deploy from them. But the rotary wing stuff didn't really kick off probably until another year or so after that. But, we still had it AME and Chinooks for, that mobility piece as well. But generally we rolled out in SRVs, gunned up, 3 guys in each car. Yeah, whatever the numbers were to make up a company group. Our company headquarters often rolled in a Bushmaster just for, the protection that they sort of offered, and, a lot of the work that they were doing on the move, it was probably best that they worked out of the back of a Bushmaster.
And do you remember the first time you got in contact with the enemy? And you mentioned earlier on, your training just kicks in. Do you remember what that was like when the first time bullets are coming back at you and you're sending them back?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that does sort of blur into the whole trip. But yeah, the first sort of time it's happening, it is a surreal moment, and it's all about identifying where it's coming from, seeing who you got in support, passing the information up, to get approvals down as to what is the next course of action and going from there. So, like I said, that generally that's what sort of happens, but it sort of all does blend into, all the different ticks that we had,
And for the listener, this next part for Fergs is going to be very hard as he talks about the loss of 2 of his good mates that he served alongside on that first deployment. Mate, you lose Michael Fussell, and then a few months, not long after, you lose Greg Sher.
Yeah.
What was happening the night or the day that you lost Mick?
Yeah, so we'd sort of been out on task for a good few nights, and we're actually on our way back to base to sort of reset for our, couple of days off, get new targets and head out again when we were told to stop. It was like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. We were sort of really in that frame of mind. We were winding down because we were about to have a day or two off after being out for a week or two doing DAs of a night time. So we're pretty tired, and we got a target pack sent through, and it was to reposture and reposition to go and do this a direct action on a target that had information that was pretty current and reliable. Anyway, so we repositioned to a VDO not far out of the Mirabad Valley, and got our final orders and prep, and stepped off on a infiltration onto a target. And we're probably a couple of Ks in, only probably 1K off the target, when I just heard this almighty explosion. You got to understand, it was pitch black, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, freezing cold, silent as we walked along. Everyone under night vision goggles, and for this explosion to go off was just shocked everyone, So everyone responded into a contact drill, trying to identify or interpret what's actually happened. And it wasn't long until the information started flowing back and situation awareness kicked in that, someone had hit an IED. Although it was pretty clear to a lot of us because we literally saw it go off and saw, the flash, and, I don't want to go into it too much, but what you would imagine going through the air in front of us, because it was, 20 to 30 metres, it was pretty clear to a lot of us. But for those who were a bit closer, to give that actual appraisal as to, are we dealing with a casualty or are we dealing with a KIA? And it sort of come back that it was our JTAC, Mick Fussell, Anzac 257, I think his call sign was, that he was deceased as a result of the explosion. And, we sort of went into a recovery, or probably a defensive posture for a while, just working out, the course of action next, the recovery phase of it, and then getting his bits and pieces together, his equipment, should I say, together, and, literally carrying him out on a stretcher. So,
Matt, mate, I thank you for sharing that, because I know how hard it is, because you knew Mick, and it's not unfortunately, we'll get into it in a minute, it's not the last time you lose a mate on this deployment. And so do you come back to TK at that point after Mick, you lose Mick, and do you then have the ramp service for him?
So I suppose, when we got back, it was kind of like a medevac situation for him. We sort of had to posture to potentially complete the mission, which sort of took a bit of time to work out the intricacies, the details about the job. And then, we sort of went back to TK. It was like an abort criteria for that. I suppose the mission per se had been compromised. So it was processing that and realising that, again, we know it was a dangerous job and it's the Badlands, and, these things could happen. But I suppose under the circumstances and when it happens right in front of you, with that velocity, it just rattles you through to your bones, But, so there was a day or two off to, downtime to process that. That's one of those things, when we lose someone, we never leave them alone. So, the guys that went back with him, and then we had to have a roster to sit with him down at the chill house sort of thing through the night, just to always be with him until someone takes him back to hand him back. So he's never left alone. He's got his flag over his coffin, and it was good to get your hour down there with him to talk to him and pray with him. It was.
And for you, because you're a police officer and you'd seen so much death at this point, it's different because this time he's a mate. And
absolutely, that.
It's, as you say, when you're a police officer, you don't know. Well, the majority of the time, you don't know the victim. This is a mate. It's a different. This time, you felt it.
Oh you feel it deep. You feel it personal, because it's one of ours. We're there to take on the enemy that commit atrocities and are terrorists. It's for them to get one on you like that really hurts deep.
And that's very early on in your deployment. You reorg, you send Mick off and send him home to his family.
And just noting the date, it's literally the anniversary a couple of days ago. So,
Yeah, and rest in peace, Mick. Never forgotten, mate.
Yeah.
Thank you for making the ultimate sacrifice for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I touched base with his mum the other day with, just reminding her that he's in our thoughts all the time, and his loss was not lost. It was through helping his country, and
mate, it's like November is a time that is very. You got Luke Worsley.
Yeah,
it is a shit time.
Yeah, it's a busy time. Well, as history now has it written down, it's every year that goes past, those dates pop up. Whether it's November is a pretty busy time for those.
So you're over there. Is it like that shocks you and rattles you guys, which would rattle anyone? How do you find the mental resolve to then get back mission focused after you've lost us?
Well, it's I suppose it's one of those things. Your resilience, which is obviously something's happened. How you respond to that, and then how you go back out and do your job. Everyone was hurting. Everyone was really affected by it. But we all know we've got to get back out there and take the fight back to them. So, I think the bosses knew that, and it's one of those things. You got to give guys their bit of time but it's important to get back out there and get back in the jobs and get your mind going again.
And do you, in this time, because you're deployed over the Christmas period, do you have a bit of downtime and actually have a Christmas? Like, do you remember having it like a nice hot dinner?
Yeah, they actually do it quite well. The support staff put a nice meal on. We're lucky enough to have a day or two off through that period. And I suppose some of us had a few goodies up our sleeve for special occasions in the shape of bourbon bottles. And it was just good to sort of have a bit of downtime and enjoy it. You know, ring home and touch base with that side of the house as well. But yeah, literally in no time we're back out on jobs Boxing Day.
You mentioned earlier on, mate, you lose Mick, and then unfortunately you have Christmas, you go into the new year, and then another mate, Greg Scher, is killed. What happened on this day, and was it just another normal day?
Yeah, well, we'd sort of set off on an operation to head up into the Bellucci Valley. Again, it was a fairly busy area for the insurgents. So, you know, our hierarchy had identified some target packs. We went up to FOB Kudos, which is like a forward operating base up in the valley. We sort of postured there to step off from there to do a task clearance. And yeah, literally one afternoon when we were sort of in our prep phase, getting stuff together, you know, the Taliban initiated IDF strikes, so indirect fire rockets onto the base. So again, we had to do a contact drill, take cover, people trying to get into positions. You know, it obviously comes in pretty quick and fast. Unfortunately, the first one come through, and a series of very unfortunate events where the rocket bounced off the top of a HESCO wall through a shipping container, if you know what they look like and how so punched through it like butter. You can imagine the velocity of it, and that's can like directly hit Greg, killing him instantly, literally not far from where a lot of us were. And the rocket kept going and impacted on the inside wall as it was going through the base near all the mortars where they were set up. So they were very lucky not to get fragged or hit by it, but unfortunately, you know, it killed Greg instantly. Again, you know, the first aid piece kicked in. You know, I don't really want to go into much more details, but yeah. So that was like that afternoon was sort of going through, trying to identify where this contact come from, you know, returning fire, calling up some air support to try and identify points of origin. And I think they gained a lot of intelligence from that because, you know, our target pack was updated to, you know, then prepare and go and get these bastards who were responsible for this action. So later that night, we called in just on last light, we had a service for Greg. We all got to say goodbye. He was loaded onto a Black Hawk AME helicopter and taken back to base. And then that night we prepped for, you know, to go out on the mission. Now I'm just trying to remember if it was that night or the night after. I just can't quite remember that. But in any event, we obviously then went out to conduct clearances, you know, on the hunt for these guys who were responsible. We hit a compound that night about midnight, 1 o'clock, after and we had armed ourselves to the hilt with 66s, 84s, because we knew we were sort of going to probably be there for a while, and we probably knew we were going to have a decent stash. Yeah, so by sort of first light, we were sort of in contact with insurgents already. There's sort of an exchange of gunfire. We had a couple of teams pushed out to try and identify gun positions, you know, and to try and draw them out as well to engage in the fight, to again identify their key positions, to then have a follow-on, you know, plan or if the opportunity presented to airstrike. So yeah, throughout the day, I think we had up to sort of 8 different phases of contact, which was all sorts of small arms, RPGs, PKMs. And we sort of, towards the afternoon, identified throughout the day that a lot of people had left the area. There was not much movement, but what movement there was, we could identify that they were insurgents sort of getting their positions sought or moving around. And we identified this particular gun position where they'd fired an RPG from, a flash. And yeah, me and my offsider in my team got up on the roof and we just fed them some 84s onto that position. Just prior to that, we had Apaches up trying to assist, and we had another guy on a set of LRFs just sort of walking us on, and we sort of had a direct hit on that compound. Yeah, which I won't go into any more details there, but it had a really good effect, and that was able to identify that position. And we then had a follow-on airstrike with the Apaches, the GBU 114s, I think they are, Hellfires, and just annihilated it, and then a follow-on 500-pound airstrike onto them as well. So again, it was, from what we could establish, it was a pretty successful operation, unfortunately at a cost of one of our own.
And is that when Greg was killed, is that getting towards the end of your first deployment?
No, that was 4th of January, so yeah, we sort of didn't finish up until March.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so yeah, there was a lot of follow-on jobs from that. Yeah, it probably wasn't, like I said, yeah, we were pretty busy. Again, back to the intelligence side of things. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it wasn't so good, but yeah, we certainly we kept really busy. Yeah, it was good.
So you come back from a really, really hard trip. How did you readjust? Because I've spoken to a lot of guys that you're in contacts, you're fighting for your life, and then you're back home at the dinner table with your kids and trays. And was it hard to readjust and come back to go back to the police after that first deployment?
Yeah, it's certainly a different mindset. Again, it's kind of what we do. Like we've got to have that switch on and off and be able to do it in a professional manner. But it'd be silly to say that these losses and some incidents that happened over there that it doesn't it certainly plays a heavy on your heart and mind. That's for sure. But again, it doesn't take long until your mind's full bore into the policing stuff, and yeah, it's just you got to adapt. And I probably suffered in silence a bit, didn't want to sort of show my hand too much that things were affecting me or I was having certain dreams or whatever else. But when trauma's involved and you're potentially frightened for your life in these certain settings, that stuff just repeats in your head a fair bit, which I think is normal from my understanding and talking to other guys. But yeah, it's kind of on the flip side, we love our job, we love what we're doing, the purpose for it. So if you could keep that focus in the forefront of your mind, that was the main thing, I think.
And you're doing a risky job overseas, but you're doing a risky job back here in Australia too. So it's, you're sort of heightened on that. You're in two career paths, mate, that are
don't worry.
dangerous.
The cortisol effects on my body are very evident, but yeah, it's draining, mate. There's no doubt about it. And it's not just me. Like I've got a lot of mates that are still doing sharp end jobs. You know what I mean? And I take my hat off to them. But yeah, it's kind of why we do it though, because we like the thrill and adventure. No regrets. That's for sure. So yeah.
And so you come back, you from the first trip, you're adjusting, you're back into the police work, and then SOTG 14.
Yeah.
2010, 2011. This comes up again. Your second deployment to Afghanistan.
Yep.
Was this another kinetic trip?
Yeah, it was. It was a little bit of a different shakeout, I suppose. We were sort of lucky enough to have 2 platoons, so 2 manoeuvre groups, and there was also a training and assist role there as well. So we're trying to really get the Afghan police or army guys to start taking more responsibility, coming out in more numbers on missions with us. It was all part of the bigger government plan to to hand over to them eventually. So the ratios and sort of shakeout of teams are a little bit different. You sort of had up to 4 Afghanis within your team. You're sort of leading teams with them. So yeah, it was sort of different that way. The nighttime direct action missions had slowed down. These were more sort of larger sort of scaled, first light or close to first light clearances. Yeah. So that was the ability to do our job, how we're trained to do it. Like we do everything in the dark, under night vision, with that element of surprise. Explosive entry. You're fought back within, a minute or 2. So to not do our business the way that we've been trained to do it, in the dynamic way that we do it, is just suicide, really. We never had any major problems in that aspect, but for them to know that they're there just gives them the ability to position, posture, prepare, and fight better.
And I recently, I've had weeks on, I've had Paul Burns on, and they said this was the hearts and minds of for the greater good of the country will accept taking that those night assaults out, do the daytime raids, and it's like you look at it now, and we'll talk about it later on in the podcast how the place ended up, and we'll leave it at that, I reckon. Go down that path.
Yeah, it's one of those things, mate. I think if things could be sharpened up with the intelligence base better, I know that's a hard thing because sometimes it's whatever the percentage or ratios or elements of intelligence that they needed to do certain things or authorise a raid that you wouldn't be going into mixed compounds. You'd be always going for insurgents which deserve to be having their doors kicked in at 3 a.m. But again, with some of the intelligence that wasn't so good, you're going in thinking that you're on instant looking for a threat, and it's what we call a dry hole or a family or the insurgent who you're after has gone. You really got to be disciplined on how you do your business. And obviously, as a lot of guys said, if a shot was never fired, and you're able to get in and detain insurgents if they were there, is a successful mission every day of the week.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. In this rotation in Rock 14, this is where you guys are more. You're going in the air assets come online for you guys now.
Yeah. We spent a lot more, I suppose, time back at base. Yeah, your sort of day's work was 2 a.m. on helos by, first light sort of thing, or even before that on target and then back. But, again, that's why you're on HAF or Helo Assault Force rotation, and sort of every 2 or 3 weeks we'd rotate onto Ground Assault Force rotation, so you would go out and be in the vehicles, which was good as well because you're out there already amongst it all sort of thing. So, yeah, it was definitely a different shakeout, that's for sure.
And on this trip, you didn't lose anyone on that second rotation?
No, there was an incident with the SOA guys where one of the engineers got shot, but through the good work of our medics and Pooley, recovering him from a tunnel, got him back and got him saved. But I was sort of more in a protection sort of perimeter role for that, so can't really talk too much about that, but he's lucky to be alive, Laz.
Absolutely. And So you're coming back from your second rotation, another kinetic tour. How are you travelling mentally at this point?
Yeah, not too bad. It's one of those things you sort of, I suppose it is hard to sort of switch on and off. Like I said, taking nothing away, the reason why we do that job, and you train hard and work hard to get in a unit to be, given the grace to go and do these high-end jobs, working with high-end units, it's, you're selected to do that for a reason, so, I suppose for me, with the combination of my police stuff and, the loss of the guys and some personal health issues, I sort of found myself in a spot of bother. And that's, how I feel it's really compounded in me, so yeah.
And we'll talk about that now, like the next few years you're back to policing, and then we'll talk about that now, the medical condition that you have, that basically it stopped both your police career and your time in the command. If you can, mate, share how that affected you.
Yeah, so there's certainly you can't do either of these jobs for 20 plus years. 23 years in the police and 24 years in defence, and on those operations, and dealing with it constantly, that you don't see or do or feel the effects of that service. So when I was diagnosed with some anxiety and different things, on top of this physical muscle condition that I was diagnosed with, really affected the mental health stuff as well. I can't really put it any other way, that it just seemed to compound those feelings more than what I was always able to try and control them or deal with them, or learn how to process the anxiety, or be it depression. People talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. I do believe it's like post-traumatic stress situations are heightened and lowered at certain points. Things sort of raise them and trigger them again, but for me, it just felt like, to have your physical ability and your physical capacity to be taken away from you was so demoralising for me, when my whole life was about health and fitness, being strong and fit for the jobs that I did. It just crushed me, mate, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, and mate, I can see it. I'm sitting in front of you. I can see it. You are someone that you still are, as best you can now in the condition. You and I've known you for a while now, and you prided yourself, mate, on being the fittest you could be to do the jobs at that elite, level. And now, through a condition that's totally out of your control,
that's it, mate.
Taken away from you.
Yeah, I know, it's it could be worse. I just keep telling myself, I could have been where Mick or Greg were, and there's a lot of people out there that are probably facing their own trials and tribulations, or whatever the case may be, but it could be worse for me. I've been able to have a great career in both, albeit they're cut short. Still fortunate and feel privileged to have been able to serve, your country and your community, and also work with some absolute legends, like, and got those friendships now, and that trust and that brotherhood forever. I've got to just hang on to that stuff and focus on that stuff.
And with this muscle, it's a hereditary disease that you...
Well, it's a recessive thing. It's a combination of parents. So me and my brother Steve have it.
Yeah, right. And are they like medical advances that they hope one day that they can get a cure for you? Or?
Well, there is no cure for it. That's always been obviously the problem with it. But I am in the middle of a clinical trial with this particular drug. Still early days, not knowing if I'm on the drug or not. It's a double-blind, placebo-led trial. So, I'm I'm suspecting I'm not on the actual drug because I haven't had any real benefits or gains. But it doesn't mean that, I could be on it. But if I wasn't on it, I could be a lot worse than what I am now. So, yeah, the results, there's been some preliminary results come out that have been positive for those who are on it. Just waiting for the formal reports on that. And then hopefully next year they may well roll out drug to people that are not on it. So, and if I'm one of them, hopefully I might get some gains. But, mate, I've got to live in hope. I suppose it has reignited a flame in me with my faith. I do pray about it. I think that's important to hold on to that, yeah.
Yes, mate, hopefully, hold on to that faith. And I speak to a lot of guys now that faith has been a big part of that healing journey and finding purpose again. And, mate, this condition, as we said, let's hope that there is medical advances that can help you. And, as we said, after 24 years in the Commandos and 23 years in the New South Wales Police, this condition has stopped your service, but you're now going to serve in another way. But how hard was that, mate, to go from being, at the elite level in the Commandos, being on top of your game in the police, to then, I'm just Fergo, now I'm just out of the police and the Commandos? How hard was that?
Oh, mate, it was, I'm probably still trying to get over it myself, but you just had this massive sense of purpose non-stop, and I loved that I had that, you know what I mean? Yeah, and just to be, it was like a slow burn, like it's slowly gotten worse and worse. Things really crept up on me, and it became pretty evident that I just, could not do it anymore. And to have to walk away, from two jobs that I'm pretty passionate about. I don't have, organisations are organisations. You have your issues with bosses and hierarchy and whatever else. But me personally, I still love what they both stand for. I, enjoyed most of my time in both those jobs, although, they're probably responsible for a lot of bad night's sleeps and whatever else, the whole social anxiety, which is a real thing. You just sort of get a bit over people, you become distrusting and stuff. But yeah, massive sense of loss of purpose. But I'm just trying to pivot that into something else. I've done a bit of study the last couple of years to get some other qualifications under my belt. So, it is a hard thing while you're processing the situation that I'm in. Yeah, but certainly want to try and put my purpose that I had back into something else. I'd like to try and work with, whether it's veterans or police or whatever, just the better part of society and help them in their time of need. Or, if you can help someone, like I had someone reach out the other day who listened to another podcast that I've done, apparently I was his motivation to join the police, and he's now looking at the reserves. Like if that's helping someone and that's how I can help someone, so be it, that's good. It's just one of those things, isn't it?
And I want to touch on this because I know you're passionate about it, and so am I. Putting your hand up and asking for help. Mental health, there's still that stigma, especially in the veteran, and we've had the Veteran Royal Commission, the veteran suicide. You've lost, as you said early in the podcast, you lost your FTO suicide, and you've lost a number of police veteran friends to suicide. Yeah. You're passionate about this, and so am I. How hard was it for you to put your hand up and say, hey, I actually need a bit of help?
Yeah, it was hard, mate. Again, unfortunately for me, the physical aspect was, I sort of feel with, or as a lot of people know, with mental health, you can dry your eyes and turn up and get on with things, or put a brave face on, and I've seen a lot of people do that for years that I've worked with, and some people don't overly get affected by it, but the physical aspect for me was, the writing was on the wall. It was very evident. I now hobble along like a bloody 70-year-old. So, yeah, it was probably that more than having to put my hand up. I had to put my hand up, but yeah, I definitely know the physical aspect exacerbated my mental health. It's pretty hard to be happy about losing your physical capacity, that's for sure.
And things that you said to me off air that you once took for granted, now you've got, it's going for a run or
mate,
being that physically fit, like
it's the best.
You take it for, some people take it for granted, and once it's taken away from you, it would be absolutely debilitating.
Yeah, mate. I have dreams about going for a run. People probably think that's a freaking nightmare, but going for a swim, run up the beach, just it's crazy how your mind sort of plays on those things. But it's just, like I say, it could be worse. I'm very grateful for my family and what successes I did have, and I just got to again put that purpose into something in the future.
And what advice would you give to your mates in both the Defence Force and your police or fireys, ambos, that if they are struggling, would you say to them it's not weak to speak and actually go and seek that help?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no point bottling it up. It's, we all know it's only going to get worse. If something's playing on your mind or, you feel you're struggling with things, either vent it with someone that you feel you can trust. It's in some of these organisations, you've got to be careful who you speak with, but I do think there's more acceptance and space for it now than what there was probably 5 or 10 years ago. Yeah, so definitely reach out to the right help. And obviously, medicine and confidence, that you could probably sort your own medical or psychological assistance and know that it's going to be kept within your, that professional relationship, and, whether that's enough to help you get through, well then it's time well spent.
Absolutely. Mate, how do you reflect on the achievements, the setbacks, and the 41 soldiers who were killed in Afghanistan and the way that it ended up? How do you reflect now on your service over there?
Well, I think I believe it was a well worth campaign, to have, that, well, the global war on terrorism, to disable that will be part of that. I suppose it does spread the message that, people who think they're going to be able to do this to other people, well, they're going to be, swiftly dealt with, exactly. So, that's pretty evident, and you can sort of see in modern conflicts that's the case as well. But, I suppose if you ask any of the 41 deceased guys' family whether that was work, I'm sure they've got a different view on it, but, I just sort of want to stress that, without those guys doing what they did, the whole campaign wouldn't have had the success that it did. People might think it wasn't successful, but it was, we had a massive impact on the battlefield over there, and that shouldn't never be lost.
Absolutely. And, I know we're recording this a couple of days after Nick's passing, and I know that he's in your thoughts, as is Greg, and as are all the guys.
Yeah.
And for you, Anzac Day and Remembrance Day is special, but do you have your own reflection as well on like day to day and remember the guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of us guys wear a remembrance band. So at times, when you're enjoying your life or having difficulties, you sort of reflect on, things that aren't good, like the loss of those guys, or, that it could have been you, or, so I suppose personally it might sound selfish, but you're glad it's not, but, you just gives you some sort of a deeper thought about those guys and what their sacrifice really does mean. That's right.
And that's why we say the old, mate. They shall grow not old. And they're etched forever that they'll be the age that they, that Mick was 25 and Greg was 30. They'll forever be those,
that's
those
it.
ages.
Yep.
Do you think for you, mate, now, get a bit morbid here, but looking back as you're, aging and living, into older age, and I know you're not that old, but you reflect on their sacrifice, and it makes you appreciate, how lucky we are.
100%, mate. Like, I know, again, with my family that means so much to me, and, having a beautiful wife and beautiful children, that I know that, I know the guys that we lost, some of their family and partners and parents, and the impacts it had on them, it just sort of hits home how grateful, I am in the situation that I am, and the importance of their loss. Yeah,
absolutely. And, mate, for you, looking back with 24 years serving your country and 23 years serving your state and community, and all that you've been through, was joining the commandos and the police still the best decision, apart from marrying Trace and having your beautiful kids?
Yeah, the best decision I've ever made. But yeah, mate, I think it has gone to shape the person I am. It could have went any other way, whether I didn't get through selection or whatever else. But I know I am proud of that service. I'm glad that I've been able to help my country and the community, and feel privileged that I've had the ability to do it in those roles. So yeah, that sort of sums that up.
Yeah, and I think, mate, now you've earned the right to enjoy the next part of your life. You serve, and you're going to continue to serve going forward. And when you what that looks like is still yet to be known. But you're still serving. You might not be wearing your cams or the blue uniform anymore, but you are serving, and coming on and talk. That's great, man. To be a young bloke listening to your other podcast and join the reserves. And, that's awesome, mate.
Oh, that's right. That's why and again, well done and congratulations to you, mate, for what you're doing, because I think these do enable people to get their story out there, and the main reason about getting the story out there is for young and up and coming people who are aspiring to do things, is to use it as motivation, or to help them look at things in a different way or understand. Like I said, mate, if we can help one person,
that's what it's all about.
I'm happy with that.
And mate, I appreciate that. I've got the best friend in the world, mate. I get to sit across from legends like yourself and many others that walk this earth, and I get to tell their stories.
Yeah.
And, mate, it's the best. It doesn't even feel like work. I love it. So,
yeah, cheers, mate.
Thank you for that. And, mate, knowing what you know now and all that you've been through, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
Yeah, I think he'd probably listen with one ear, but what advice? Yeah, probably just to, do the best you can. Like, it's, I suppose it's probably advice that I've tried to tell my own kids, that if, they've got a dream or aspiration, is just, one is identifying exactly what that is and then going for it. And, I can honestly say that both my children are doing that in their lives as we speak. I'm immensely proud of them. But, for everyone out there, it's just identifying what you love or what you like or what you want to do, and going for it. So if it's a case of having to build up your physical ability to do a certain thing, or your intellect, intelligence to learn or to gain entry into something, well, make it happen. The only person that can make it happen is yourself. And, find that motivation, find what makes you tick, and then chase it down. Yeah.
And being that you're a dad, are you fearful, and all that you've seen, are you fearful of what the future might hold for your kids? That'll never, your son does a pretty dangerous job, and your daughter is, she's gone on, is doing amazing things. Is that fearful of what, with all the unrest in the world that's around at the moment, is that something that never leaves your mind? Because you've seen the bad in both the army and in the police.
Absolutely, mate. I think if you asked any parent, their biggest fear would be losing a child, which takes me back to, what I was saying before about the boys that we lost overseas, the fear of losing a child, like, before they've had their ability to have a nice and happy and loving life, that would just destroy me. So, yeah, that's it. That definitely is a fear.
Absolutely. And, mate, what advice would you give anyone who is thinking of joining the police or the wider emergency services with, 23 years of experience? What would you say to any young person that is, and I know you mentioned earlier on, get some life experience, but be prepared that it's not a normal job? Would that be the advice?
Yeah, I suppose most people see, police rushing off to a job or walking along in a uniform or, that side of it. There definitely is a very dark side to it. It's just, the way humans are. They will do and what they can do to one another. Is just be prepared for that and understand, the real magnitude of what you will see and do within the job. But it doesn't mean that should scare you away. Just have an understanding and identify how, you will deal with that, process it, and how to move forward is the most important thing. But, all I can do is encourage young people to train hard, study hard, and join up, because they're both very rewarding jobs. If it's not for you, identify that and move on and do something that is. But, at the end of the day, we've always needed emergency services and defence personnel. If you can find something that really you enjoy within those services, you'll have a very fulfilling life.
And you mentioned it earlier. Would you say to police that if they are going to join, maintain that fitness level?
100%. Yeah.
If you're overweight, you can't do your job. So fitness, be the fittest you can be.
Yeah.
And seek that knowledge.
Yep.
Of, carry a tourniquet or all these things. That'd be some advice you'd say to them as well.
100%. I think, even going into them, you want to have a foundation of fitness, a good foundation of strength, and some sort of ability to look after yourself or the person that you're working with. Without that, I think you're behind the eight ball already. It's just not this day and age with the amount of, skills and weapons that are out there. You got to know what you're doing when you're on the street, because you'll get found out real quick. So to have that baseline of, if you're thinking about joining up, go and join your local either boxing gym, MMA gym, or a gym, and start getting strong, start getting fit and tough, because it's a tough gig out there. Yep.
Great advice, mate. And someone who has served at the sharp end of both, great advice. And mate, in the world, we are hemorrhaging police left, right and centre. What more do you think can be done to keep that retention of the experience of 15 years, 20 years? Because at the moment, you know it yourself, and the podcast I did with Nico earlier, 4,000 positions that we're lacking here in New South Wales. But on a world scale, policing is hemorrhaging so many numbers. what more do you think can be done to...
Oh, I reckon it's pretty easy, and that's give the crooks less rights and give authorities more rights. You know, it's just so lopsided, it's not funny. You know, you want to commit crime, well, you know, in my view, like just recently, that police sergeant that got charged in relation to a young guy on a motorbike, without bringing race and different things into it, like it's just got that lopsided. It's really concerning. Like, this guy could be facing, and he's just doing his job, you know, at the heat of the moment to make decisions. You know, it is a hard thing, and they say, well, that's why you get paid the big bucks. But, you know, people make mistakes, but in the course of his action, he's only acting in good faith and acting in a way to either stop crime or prevent crime. You know, so the sooner our governments identify that, change that, you know, I think people will start to see that, and you know, recruiting, retention and stuff may well change, because I know, you know, myself, it was starting to become a real concern, like the witch hunt for people doing the wrong thing or whatever else. And I know, you know, a few of my good friends have been stood down from, you know, literally defending themselves upon arresting crooks. You know, it might sound a bit ordinary to say it wouldn't pass a pub test, but that's where your general, you know, your community sit and talk about stuff that, you know, if it doesn't pass the pub test, well, you know, and that's the issue, is that crooks have got too many rights, you know, and the police and the like are just under so much scrutiny. It's in the Defence Force as well, with, you know, war crime allegations and different things, like to turn around and point the finger at people for stuff that they weren't there, they weren't faced with the threats or the complications of scenarios and situations, and then they want to hang you out to dry. Like, I could talk more about that from a personal situation that happened in Afghanistan with some friends getting charged with offences. So it's just, yeah, and it just makes people question their service, question why they're even there, that they're, you know, they're not only being targeted by the enemy, they're getting targeted by their own hierarchy. That's got to change, 100%.
100%. And these days, there seems to be that wokeness that's coming to policing, but it's the world with wokeness. And I know it's making the guys and the girls on the ground jobs harder, because they're not thinking clearly of making that decision to, you know, the split-second decision to, you know, arrest someone or get physical can lead to being sued, or, you know, they're fearful that they'll lose their mortgage or they'll lose their job. Mm-hmm. And mate, I know as a citizen, I don't want my police thinking about that. I want them thinking that, and one day it's going to come a proper, mate, where a police officer is going to die because they've got all these thoughts going through their head of, oh shit, I've got to protect my job, I've got to cover my arse. I want our police to be, doing the job of being a police officer, mate, and taking these scumbags down. That's what a police... Oh, that's what...
Yeah, exactly, mate. No argument here with that. But, yeah, absolutely, you're right.
It's a real bugbear, mate, and, you know, we won't get political, but it's, you know, hopefully...
It's political.
I'd love to get political with you, but it's not, you know, we'll leave that one alone, mate. But, mate, in your opinion, what more needs to be done to help first responders, be it with support offered for trauma on a day-to-day basis, that, you know, what support needs to be, do you think would be beneficial, that because of the trauma that police, fire and ambulance see on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, well, I am aware of the, you know, we do have things in place with, you know, grief and trauma and having that interaction with the psychologist and different things. You know, I do also think that there's a bit of a cultural problem around just being able to talk about it. You know, it stems back to the old days where dry your eyes and, you know, have a spoon full of concrete and harden the up. But you know, those days are gone. I think what we're seeing with a lot of mental health things is a result of that, and people not being able to, you know, bleed off a bit of pressure at certain times and talk about things and understand that, you know, we all do feel the effects of, you know, grief, trauma, and, you know, when you're dealing with those emotions is often what causes it, that, you know, it's okay to talk about it and seek the right help. You know, and if you need to have the time off, well, you know, organisations should be looking at that more to allow it to happen, as opposed to, you know, just getting you back to fill the roster and different things. So,
and do you feel that to stop some of that hemorrhaging, that if police are given just a break, like to go on, you know, 6 weeks off, or, you know, take a sabbatical and have a break, and then come back, do you think if that was implemented, that things might
yeah. Well, people will probably say that that's already there, but, you know, again, people are probably afraid to put their hand up saying it's a psychological thing, because, you know, then they, one, get labelled for it, or two, it might become something against their profile of having those issues for when they want to go into a specialist section. You know, the psychological assessments come into it quite heavily. So people probably are zipping up because of that. But, yeah, I think it comes back to culture and understanding that, you know, yeah, it's okay to be a bit disturbed by something. Yeah, it might be keeping you awake. It doesn't mean that you're a Fruit Loop. Like, I feel that that's potentially more my side of it than actually being labelled with all these labels. Yeah, so the culture is a big thing.
Would you say to your mates that are still in that it is a scary thing when you do leave the organisation, whether it be defence or the police, that you're not, the golden handcuffs, they can be released, like you can find your way if you are looking at transition?
Oh, certainly. Like, it's as much as you feel it means that much to you and whatever else, there's heaps of things out there that you can get your teeth into, that's for sure.
We look at the skills that you've gained.
Yeah, your RPL stuff, you know, what other companies, industries want in people, often ex-emergency service people have that just ingrained in them through the fact of who they are as individuals and why they did those jobs, you know.
They're highly sought after skills,
yeah,
that, you know, that take years of other training that people sometimes don't even get, that you know, defence or first responders deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
That, you know, so you're not always tied to that job, and you know, that they're, at the end of the day, it does become who you are, but at the end of the day, it is still just a job. That's what it is. And, you know, find that way of service again, be it, you know, joining your local minis, or, you know, you can still be of service without wearing a uniform.
Yeah. You know, I suppose not losing sight of, you know, they're good paying jobs and you're walking away from that, but, you know, when your bottle's full or your tire's flat or however you want to look at it, you know, you got to go. But, you know, what you can be RPL'd into other industries, you'd be very surprised. There's, you know, companies out there that are willing to sign off on all sorts of diplomas, advanced diplomas and different things, which I've been fortunate enough to look into it or get done as well. So, yeah, there's certainly scope for anything you really want to put your mind to.
Absolutely. Mate, what advice would you give to anyone who is thinking of, you know, going down that SF route that you went down, both prepare, like I know there's a lot of books out there now, but what advice would you give to them to say physically and mentally prepared for a selection?
Yeah, well, there's no other question around that. You have to be fully prepared both mentally and physically. People say, well, how do you prepare mentally? Well, I think it starts with the the physical preparation. So, you'll know what's going to be required, and if you're not doing that plus probably 25% of those times or those numbers that you need to get in, you need to be at least up around there. And with that physical training that will come, be it 1 year, 2 years, I think the mental resilience will come along. So you become a long distance runner, swimmer or rider at that high level. You sort of can't do those things without having a strong mind, and that's kind of the best way to explain it. Is you've got to have a no-fail attitude. You've got to have the determination to go beyond any sort of ailment, pain, or whatever it might come up. That's literally what it's about. And the biggest or the best phrase I think people need to, or people should take on board, is that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. If you can't do that for long periods of time, be it hungry, cold, wet, miserable, these are the environments that we work in. Not all the time, but if people have got to understand, that's the reality of the job. Yeah, it's a challenge, but very rewarding.
It's an attitude too. It's that if you get the attitude right, and you guys used to live by it, and I know the boys in 2nd Commando and West used to live by this. It's a daily renewable contract. Doesn't matter how good you were yesterday, today's a new day.
That's right.
And that's the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. As you say, it's no mission, like no fail mission. But you have to, as you said, have to be prepared to fail, because, and for you, mate, what are some of the lessons that you've learned from failure?
Well, I suppose it makes you realise when you do fail how disappointed you are that you did what you could have done better, and that's happened over the time. Like, there's been different pieces of physical testing or courses where you might fail a piece or whatever else, and it's like, if I don't pass a retest or whatever, you could be done here, and you've put this much effort into it. Yeah, so it's one of those things that you really learn from failing, because you go, well, you don't want to fail, because if you fail, the whole objective of you being there to do the selection course is just all gone out the window. So each step needs to be a no-fail approach and work out a way how not to fail.
Yeah, absolutely. Mate, what are your plans going forward now with Trace and your kids into the future?
Yeah, well, the kids are going great guns. They're in their respective professions. My son's a pilot. He's about to start with air ambulance. My daughter's a training nurse. She's still got a year to go with her study, but yeah, I'm sort of looking at some, something else to keep me, without going it too much. You don't really want to sort of say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, if it doesn't come to fruition. But yeah, there's a couple of things bubbling away. Let's put it that way.
Just spend some time now with Trace and enjoy that,
Yeah, mate. Yeah, we did a lap of Australia last year, which was fantastic. Highly recommend that to anyone in there when the time's right. But we live in such a great country. We did the caravanning thing, a full lap over about 9 months, and enjoyed every part of it. Yeah.
And I can see, mate, the kids have followed in the emergency services direction, like you, being that your son's now going for air ambulance.
Well, he's an aviator through and through.
Yeah.
So, but he wanted to again fly in a capacity to give back at that more critical level. So yeah, there probably is a little bit of that in him to help people at that level with his flying skills. But no doubt he'll do his time there and then get into the airliners where the big bucks are, I think, is where he's at, and start getting me some cheap flights too.
and your daughter's gone down that nursing path, which is that's really
yeah.
as well, mate.
Oh yeah, no, she's doing great gun. extremely proud of my beautiful daughter, Lil. Yeah.
Absolutely, mate. And if people want to get in touch with you to talk to you about, either being in defence or being a police officer, how they get in contact with you?
Yeah, mate. Well, I'm on socials, Facebook, Insta and LinkedIn, all through you, mate. You can pass the details on. But, yeah, definitely happy to talk to anyone out there who wants to have a chat.
Absolutely, mate. And Fergs, it's been an absolute privilege to sit across from you and record your story for history. And, mate, I want to thank you for your service to our country and your service to our community and our state, New South Wales, and all that you do for veterans and first responders now, mate, going forward. And anyone who is struggling, you always are there, lend an ear to help. And, mate, it's just, as I say, it's just been an absolute privilege and an honour to have you come on True Blue and share your story. So, mate, thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Let's go over here.
Thanks for listening to True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those that pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice and determination. See you next time.